Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and right before the holidays, I bought myself a new gaming laptop, the Lenovo Y740. This is the 15-inch version, and I got it equipped with the RTX graphics, and I went all out. I put a 2080 in this one, and I thought what I would do in this review is not only review the laptop and tell you what I think about it, but also talk about some of the thought process that I went through in choosing one of these things, because I did look at a lot of different laptops from a lot of different companies. Ended up settling here on the Lenovo for a couple of reasons, but mostly on price. So we're going to be taking a closer look at this in just a second, but I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that I paid for the laptop with my own funds. All of the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, nor is anyone reviewing it or approving it before it was uploaded. And I should also note that Lenovo has sponsored content here on the channel in the past, but they are not sponsoring this video. So let's get into it now and see what this laptop is all about. So let's take a closer look now at the hardware. This is available in a number of different configurations, and of course you can really customize it the way you want. I'm going to talk about what I put in mine and why, but you can head over to their website and do a custom build and figure out exactly what pieces you want in yours. Now, this is the 15-inch variant. There's a 17-inch version as well of the Y740, but the 15 made more sense for me because my goal was mostly portability here with decent performance, and that's why we went with the smaller one. This is a 1080p 15-inch display, 144 Hertz. It supports G-Sync, so all of those high frame rate games will look nice and smooth on this one. And it's super bright too, 500 nits. The IPS gives you really good viewing angles, so you don't have to have a direct line of sight to it for the best image. And it's great when you're playing with friends. You can all kind of huddle around the laptop here and everyone gets a decent view of the game that you're playing, especially for couch co-op stuff and whatnot. So good display overall, very happy with that. I think they've got a 4K display available too, but this one just made more sense from a cost perspective, and I'm not regretting that at all. I've got 16 gigs of RAM inside. I can easily upgrade that later if I want. I got an i7 9750H CPU. That, of course, is an Intel chip. It's a 6-core processor. We'll take a look at some benchmarks in a little bit to see how it performs versus some other things that we've tested recently, but overall, no issues there with the CPU. Now, GPU, I chose the RTX 2080. I had to do a couple little different configuration options to get that one to show up on the list as I was getting everything set up in the shopping cart there. And this is the Max-Q variant of the NVIDIA chip. Now, if you're looking for a thin and light laptop, there's a good chance you're going to have the Max-Q version of the GPU put inside of the laptop. And these run slower than the regular 2080s that you might find in a larger laptop or on a desktop PC. And so you really need to be aware of that. If you want the maximum performance, thin and light is not going to be your choice, because you will have a sacrifice here in performance to hit the size and weight that you're trying to get here. So you will see in the benchmarks that this is not going to perform as nicely as, again, a larger device or desktop. So just be aware of that. I wasn't as aware of it when I was purchasing, and they didn't make Max-Q a big thing in the product description. So a lot of times your manufacturers are just going to call it a 2080, and maybe it'll have Max-Q somewhere else. So just be on the lookout for that Max-Q, because again, those will not perform as well as a regular 2080 you'll find in something else. But nonetheless, I'm very pleased with the performance I'm getting out of here, and I'll compare it to some other devices that I have. I was expecting, though, just a little bit more performance than what I ended up seeing, at least in some of the benchmarks that I ran, but the games have been working fine on this one. Now, for storage, it originally came with a 256 gigabyte NVMe SSD installed. And then for some reason, in order to get the 2080 GPU option, I also had to put a 1 terabyte mechanical spinning hard drive in for some reason. It was one of those weird configuration options where you have to have this and that to be able to get the thing you want. So when it arrived, I took out the 1 terabyte mechanical drive they made me buy and put in a SATA SSD inside of it. It was very easy to work with. But it doesn't have any extra storage slots after that. So you've got one NVMe slot and one SATA slot, and that is it. The Alienware that I was using before had a few more storage options, but again, because of the size, I'm not complaining all that much about that. So we did swap out that terabyte drive. I put in a 480 gigabyte SATA SSD, and then down the road, of course, I can always change or swap those out if I need to. So that configuration all in was about $1,750, and there was a bunch of things going on at the time that I bought, and that was really what put Lenovo over the top for me, because I was able to get this for about $300 or $400 less than I saw anywhere else. And I was able to do that because they had a couple $100 promotion right on the website from the get-go. And then I also used the Rakuten rebate thing. I don't know if you've ever heard of this before, but it started as Fat Wallet, and then it got bought by the big e-check thing or whatever, and then Rakuten bought out that company. So that week, Lenovo was offering 10% back as a rebate. So I'll get the rest of the money in February. So 10% plus what they were already giving, plus another point or so on my credit card. So it was a pretty good deal all in to get this thing configured. Out the door, it was about $2,000, but again, we'll get a few $100 back in a couple of weeks to round out the deal. So I was very pleased with the price that I paid, and again, it was far less than what I saw other computer retailers selling their laptops for. Now, I was very pleased with the size and weight when I took it out of the box, and I immediately felt comfortable with my decision. It weighs just under 5 pounds. It is 4 pounds, 15 ounces, according to my scale over there. That's 2.24 kilograms. By comparison, the Alienware 15 I was using before weighed a whopping 7 pounds, 8.4 ounces, or 3.41 kilograms. So this was a significant reduction in weight. It was such a big reduction that I was able to relatively comfortably carry this and my MacBook Pro in a backpack on a family trip we took right after it came in. So overall, I'm very, very pleased with how much more portable this is, and I'm already taking it places I wasn't taking the other computers, so that was a good thing. Ports-wise, it's got a bunch of them. Let's start off, though, with the keyboard and then work our way to the sides and back here. This is an RGB keyboard, and it's made in conjunction with Corsair. It's a little bit off-center because they have these macro keys here on the left-hand side, so I'm often getting myself aligned improperly, so I just have to get used to that. But the keys feel nice. They've got decent travel to them, the same shape that we've seen on other Lenovo laptops. My only gripe at the moment, though, is that every time I load up the Corsair software to configure the keyboard, the trackpad, for some reason, decides to disable itself. The software runs for about 2 minutes, and then the trackpad goes away, and that's been very annoying. So I've got to reach out to tech support on that. I even updated all the drivers. I got a new Corsair application version for the keyboard. None of it seems to be making any difference. The trackpad keeps going poof every time I load up that software to make a configuration. Right now I've got it set to a boring blue, but you can have it pulsate, do all the stuff you've seen some of those RGB keyboards on laptops do. There's also some accent lighting on the side in the vents there that will light up that you can configure too. There's no fingerprint reader, though, so that was one thing that I wish it had, because I'm often having to continually type my password in to get into the computer. I have a third-party fingerprint reader. I might just stick to the side there and use that instead. The trackpad is kind of old school. It's not a click pad. You do have 2 buttons here, one for left and one for right. Seems to work fine. It's just a little, again, older school in its design, but it gets the job done. Nothing fancy, and sometimes I like a no-frills trackpad. I think for a lot of folks who are playing games, of course, though, you'll want to connect up a gaming mouse to get the full experience. Now, as for ports, you've got a 4-lane Thunderbolt 3 port here on the left-hand side. That, of course, is also compatible with USB-C. You got a headphone microphone jack over here. On the other side, you've got a full-size USB 3 port. And you've got a bunch of ports on the back, and they've got a nice little label here on the back casing to tell you what you're about to plug into. So you've got a display port out. This is a mini display port here. I'm going to try to get a good angle for you there. There you go. Mini display port out here. You've got an HDMI output here. These will both go out at 4K 60 Hertz, so I was able to plug it into my OLED TV earlier. This USB 3 port here is a Gen 2 port. It'll support the faster 10 gigabit speed. You've got a 1 gig Ethernet jack back there. Next to it is a regular USB 3 running at 5 gigabits per second. And then you've got your power input here along with a Kensington lock to keep it from walking away on you. There are 2 cooling fans, and you'll definitely want to keep the venting clear all around the laptop for the airflow. That's really critical on these gaming laptops. And you've got a nice rubber foot here to keep the bottom portion of the air intake elevated. The fan noise is certainly going to be there on this one. It's just unavoidable, especially when you're playing a game. Compared to the Alienware, it's a lot quieter, but you will be hearing a lot of fan noise running here as you're playing games and stuff on it. So just keep that in mind. It is not a quiet machine, but it is quieter than what I experienced with my larger Alienware that was so loud I could hear it across the room. This one you could hear it across the room as well, but not as bad. So I would say noise-wise, it's certainly an improvement over what I was experiencing before with a gaming laptop, but I don't think there are many gaming laptops out there that are silent. And this one certainly will not be, so prepare yourself for that. Now, the build quality on the device feels pretty nice. It's a mixture of metal and plastic. We've got metal here on the keyboard deck, we've got metal on the back of the display, but the interior of the display, the bezels are plastic here. Some of the fan venting areas are also plastic, so it's got a bit of a mix of materials, but it doesn't feel cheap. It's got a nice solid feel to it. It's also very well balanced from a weight perspective, so when you're moving the display around, it's not taking the whole keyboard with you, and you've got a good range to the hinge here. This is not a touch display, but you can have it lay flat like that if you want. So overall, decent build quality. I'm not crazy about the speakers on this. If you are someone who wants really good gaming speakers on your gaming laptop, this is probably not going to be the one for you. They're kind of tinny, they rattle a little bit, nothing great here at all. But I typically use headphones with my laptops, so for me it wasn't a deal breaker, but for some of you out there it might be, so just be advised of that. Battery life on gaming laptops is never all that great. If you're sitting here at the desktop and doing some web browsing and word processing, I think you could probably get 5 or 6 hours out of it maybe if you turn down the display brightness. But if you're playing games on here, even if you have power settings enabled, you'll be lucky to get maybe 2 hours or so, far less if you turn off all of those power saving features. These things are really not designed to be used when they're not plugged in, especially when you're playing games, so just be advised of that. And speaking of game playing, let's take a look at some games running on the device now. We'll look at a few running on the 1080p display here, including one with some RTX enhancements, and then we'll take a look at how it did at 4K. All right, so I've got the RTX-enabled version of Quake 2 running here, and you'll notice that we are getting about 40 frames per second here at 1080p with those features enabled. But you get a lot of interesting lighting effects here, as you can see. So we have like proper reflections in the computer panels here. You'll see a lot of unique and interesting lighting in the game as you're running through some of these different levels. It really looks nice for an old game. It's amazing what they were able to do with it here. I should note you might be seeing some screen tearing. This is just the result of the interaction with my live video recording system here, but overall it looks pretty nice on the laptop display. But again, you're seeing a pretty big performance hit here by having those features enabled. So now if I jump under the stairs here and just disable the RTX features and just go back to the regular OpenGL version of the game, you'll notice here as it's switching back that we'll see a pretty significant increase in performance, although of course the game doesn't look nearly as good. So you can just get a sense when you have a game that's really going to take advantage of all these different RTX features that it really will make a performance impact. And this is one area where if you have the Max-Q GPU, you'll definitely see a performance hit over a more powerful version of the same chip. So here is Gears 5, and you can see what the GeForce experience set for me on settings. We're mostly at ultra and insane in some cases here, and it's really cranked up to the max. And I'll jump into the game here real quick so you can see what kind of frame rates we're experiencing here. So overall, it's maintaining 60 here, as you can see, with the image quality up all the way, and it's a really good experience here to get on a laptop, and really no buffering or lagging or anything else like that going on here. And I've been pretty happy to see what we've been able to get out of something pretty portable here. So the games look great, they play great, even if we have a GPU that could be doing better if it was in a larger form factor. Now, when I got the laptop, it wasn't tuned for the best performance. There's actually a setting you should be looking for when you first boot it up, and that setting is inside of the Lenovo Vantage control panel. You'll notice here under Quick Settings that thermal mode right now is set for performance, but when I got it, it was set to balance even when it was plugged in. And what this will do is clock the CPU higher and run the fans faster, and I found that I did see a slight uptick in performance as a result of doing this, and I'll show you that in the benchmarks here in a second. Inside of here also is where you will update your drivers and your BIOS. This is something you'll want to keep an eye on, especially in the early days of this computer, because there will be updates coming down, so be on the lookout for that. This is also where you can configure the 2 macro keys on the keyboard. and you can do that right in here by recording some macros to assign to one of those two keys. All right, so let's move on to some benchmarks here, and then we'll take a look at 4K performance. We're going to start with the TimeSpy benchmark, and you're going to see the laptop here listed twice. The score we got that we're keeping is 7,727, and that was when we put the laptop into performance mode. You'll see we got a decent bump in the frames per second, at least on the first graphics test, over having the laptop running in its default mode. We didn't see as big of a jump on the second graphics test there, and the CPU test is about the same, but we are getting slightly better performance there when we have the performance setting enabled. But you should note that we're not doing all that much better than my desktop PC running with a GTX 1080 on that test. And again, that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at the Max-Q hardware here. It is not going to be as fast. But the result, though, for me at least, is that I am getting something that is pretty much as fast as my desktop PC and something that's very portable. But you should keep your expectations in check when you're looking at the Max-Q hardware versus the non-Max-Q variant. Let's take a look at a few other tests. Now, we also did some VR tests, the VRMark Orange Room, and we got a score of 8,127 and an average frame rate of 177.16 frames per second. That's a little below what my desktop machine is doing upstairs with the 1080 GPU inside, but that might be due to the fact that the desktop does have a much more powerful CPU driving it as well. That will certainly give you a little bit of a bump on one of these VR tests. But nonetheless, I did connect up my Oculus Quest to this and ran it in link mode. Everything looked great. It performed great. It was a really nice VR rig for something portable. And of course, if you've got that Quest now, you've got something very portable for PC VR. Overall, good performance, but not as good as my desktop PC upstairs. And we also ran the 3DMark stress test, which runs a benchmark over and over again to see if the computer slows down the longer it's under load. There we got a score of 96.4%. That is not a passing grade. Passing is 97%. So it's conceivable you might see a little bit of a slowdown here or there if you're really keeping a close watch on things. Practically, I'm not seeing any performance reductions. I was playing a couple games for a few hours at a time on this and haven't seen any performance degradation that I could notice, but it's possible given what we saw on the results of that score. Let's take a look now, though, at some 4K gaming. We took a bunch of screenshots with this a little bit earlier on a 4K monitor, and let's see how we did. So let's begin with Fortnite. The frames per second counter might be a little blurry up there in the upper right-hand corner, but we were keeping notes as we were capturing this footage. Fortnite was doing about 40 to 50 frames per second when we had things set at 4K epic settings. When we reduced down to high settings at 4K, we got between 60 and 70. Rocket League, highest settings, 4K, 230 to 250 frames per second. GTA 5, 4K, highest settings, about 15 to 30 frames per second. When we went down to the lowest settings, we were doing about 130 to 150. So that's one game where you'll probably want to tweak things to get it into the sweet spot of image quality and frame rate at the 4K resolution. Witcher 3, Ultra, 4K, 45 to 60 frames per second, depending on what was going on screen. Doom, the new version of Doom, of course, Ultra 4K settings, we were getting about 60 to 70 frames per second. So it's definitely a capable 4K device, no problems really in getting games to run at that resolution, but you will be tweaking things a bit to really get it into the sweet spot, again, given some of the limitations that the Max-Q will be presenting versus a non-Max-Q 2080 chip. So overall, I'm relatively pleased with what I picked up here. Again, my primary objective was something that was powerful and portable, and that's what I got, and I'm happy with that. I was, though, expecting a little more performance than what I got out of the 2080 Max-Q, and I wish I had done a little bit more homework on that first, because although it performs nicely, it's not performing any better than my desktop 1080 is performing for the most part. That's not a bad thing. I can do everything I can do on my desktop now on my laptop, which is great, including all the VR stuff, but I was, again, still expecting slightly better performance than what I ended up with here, and I want you to be very much aware of some of the performance trade-offs with these Max-Q variants before you buy. So just keep that in mind and look very closely at the specs that the manufacturer is listing before you purchase, because they don't always put the Max-Q in there when they're referring to the GPU. And that, of course, will be a big difference in performance when you are setting it up and playing with it. So just keep that in mind. But beyond that, it's pretty good. One thing I want to do with this that I haven't done yet is install Linux on it. I know a lot of you like for me to do that. So we'll probably explore that in a future video, because we will have to do a full-on Linux installation and get all the drivers working and everything else. So let's do that together. I'd love to get some tips from you on getting a gaming laptop working with Linux. If you've got some things like gotchas and things I need to think about, let me know down in the comment section about that. And I'm sure I missed stuff or didn't play games that you wanted me to play, so also let me know what I should be trying on this laptop next, especially stuff that takes advantage of the RTX graphics, because I would like to explore that a little bit more too. So we'll be coming back to this, I'm sure, because I own it. I bought it. I'll have it forever, at least until I get bored with it. So I would love to explore more of what you can do with a portable RTX GPU in the coming weeks here. And that's going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters, the 4 Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, Rajesh, Logic GR, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.